Right.
Ah, there we go. Sorry about that. We had a problem with the video capture there for a minute. But good evening, everyone. You join me tonight here at our studio, and I am, of course, AdrianJWilliams from Williams Media. And tonight we are joined by the very DeanRHeathcote, obviously the new leader of the Social Democrats and former Prime Minister, who has recently just stepped away from the BBC to return to politics, which is quite a large move, and I'm sure everyone's got plenty of questions. So I've come up with a list that we're going to go through, and obviously there may be some questions adding on to that. So, hello, Dean. How are you?
Hello, I'm doing fantastic. Yourself?
Yeah, I'm doing very well, thank you. So first off, obviously the big question on sort of everyone's mind, I suppose, is why have you decided to return? What is the like sort of exact moment that made you want to return to politics? Obviously, I know you delved into this a little bit in your speech yesterday, but what was the exact sort of turning point, really, that made you think, I want to come back to this?
It was about a week ago, or just over a week ago. For quite a few months, Blair and I, Blair, of course, being my sort of campaign manager, someone I've known for a few years now, we always kind of had discussions while we were working at the BBC. We'd always sort of sit together sometimes and think, it would be nice to do it again, wouldn't it? And obviously, we're both, I think, a lot busier than we are nowadays than we were back then. Excuse me. But we've always kind of wanted to do it again. But we loved running the BBC. We loved doing it, and so we stayed there. It was only in the last week or so that it was kind of on the urging of a couple of people who I really do consider to be close friends and confidants. That I kind of it was put in my mind again, and I was weighing how much can I contribute to the community in politics compared to currently at the BBC. And I eventually settled on the fact that I could probably do it contribute a lot more to the community if I was back in politics doing what I kind of love and loved doing. Instead of kind of being hauled up at the BBC, which don't get me wrong, really fun and honestly, just the time I had the time of my life at the BBC, and I know Sunnessence is going to do an amazing job with it. But I think it was time to make a return and kind of just try and do something a bit more unique this time. Focus a lot more on the MPs and the party, but also on having a good time and making politics enjoyable again, which I think a lot of people would agree is politics is a bit dead right now. So that's my answer to why I've come back, I suppose.
That's very interesting. Thank you very much. So the next thing, obviously, it's been quite a while since you were previously involved, having been, I believe, Prime Minister on three accounts, which was sort of when I sort of joined the community to begin with. So, um, but it's been quite a while. So obviously, politics has changed quite a lot. So, but obviously, I'm not really so much a politician. Obviously, you're coming into the role. How have you found things have changed from your sort of view, if that makes sense?
There's a lot less, I think, veterans now and people who, for lack of a better term, I think know the fullness of what they're doing as a parliamentarian and statesman in this community. A lot of people have obviously, have gone to the Lords, which is obviously great to see that the Lords is becoming, a lot more diverse. That's always wonderful to see. But with the House of Commons, it does feel like the experience pool is getting smaller and smaller, and the political education of MPs is even smaller than that. Um, so I think the major difference between, I guess, back in 2022 when I did, won 3 elections in that year, and now is I think just the level of political education that's currently in the sort of political sphere and Westminster, which is something I want to turn around. I'm always happy to admit that I think the Social Democrats have neglected that duty prior to now. And I think all the parties have neglected that duty. It's why you see the quality of MPs that you've got right now, which I don't think is necessarily the MP's fault, but I think the fault really lies with leaders and leadership with that, because they have to sort of instill those ideas and those skills and knowledge and behaviours into MPs. And I'm very much hoping to turn that around really and actually cultivate a generation of leaders for the future of this community going into 2025 and beyond. I hope that answers your question.
Yep, lovely. Thank you very much. I think that's very interesting to hear. Obviously, I'm aware, sort of, yes, in your speech the other day, you did talk quite a lot about sort of the, lack of experience with MPs, which is obviously something I'd like to come along to a little bit later in the interview. So we will delve into that a little bit. But moving on to sort of how things have changed a little bit in terms of the people staying on that sort of track. How do you find the current party leadership for the other parties? What's your sort of opinions on the other, party leaders? Michael, Boston, Bushbury. What's your opinions on them, and how do they compare to your sort of previous opponents, shall we say?
I'd have to dispute Bushbury being the National Party leader because I'm pretty sure it's ZZ Investor controlling the ship right now. But no, Bushbury is a wonderful person. Again, I get along with all the leaders for the most part. I think that you got to separate the personal from the politics. Like they're great friends and individuals. I don't want obviously anything I say on the political end of things to insinuate that I absolutely hate their guts or anything like that. No, but you're getting political with things. I don't think Michael's going to do anything in the next 2 months, really. I think it's going to just be him kind of sitting there pretending he's doing something and doing a lot of tweets as if he's doing something and a lot of photos of him shooting people probably on Northern Ireland and whatever and what have you. And I think it's just going to be a lot of that. Well, there's a lot of good people in the Unionists, don't get me wrong, but I don't think that. I think their leadership kind of undermines them a little bit. The Pirates, I do have a sense of admiration for the Pirates in that I do like me a fringe political party that's different. I think that's really awesome to have in a community like this. And credit where credit is due to Barron's. He loved pursuing those kind of things even back in 2022, and it's like it's kind of cool to see that a party is like something that he's kind of cultivated as is continued to exist. And I think Boston will do a good job. I'd love to stay on good terms with Boston, of course. There's no secret about it. But ultimately, I think strong government. Actually, no, I forgot to mention the Nationals, haven't I? Although then again, I've just said ZZ Investors basically running the ship. So, do I even need to elaborate on that? Can the viewers understand what I'm saying by that? Probably not. But no, I think the Social Democrats will offer something different, mostly because A, I'm running it, and B, I'm putting together a very good team that I trust, that I have absolute faith in, and a team that I hope to grow and expand on in the next 2 months. What I want to do at Social Democrats is not just have a parliamentary team that's keeping the government to account. I want to build a movement with the party. I want to build something that's so vast that every single person who joins has an opportunity to contribute to the effort. If you're good with legislation, you're good with parliament stuff, you'll be an MP. If you're good with the campaign side of things, you'll be an excellent campaign organizer. I think it's each to their own kind of in that element. But I'm sure I'll be able to discuss a lot more about it with your future question regarding development and stuff. But yeah, that's my views on the other parties. Really, I think I respect them, but I also I think I could do better.
All right, lovely. Thank you very much. It's very interesting to obviously hear again. Obviously, we're all one big community at the end of the day, as he sort of said there. So the next thing as well, sort of staying on track with, I suppose, well, I don't know, how things have changed. Obviously, you've got Social Democrats now. And what's your sort of? Well, so we're going to move on to that sort of side of things. So what's your sort of current stance on the policies that the Social Democrats have been having going into the last election? Their manifesto. And are we likely to see any changes in that manifesto for future elections? Any big policies that you might, completely reverse or just bring new ideas, or sort of elaborate on that? That's quite.
Absolutely. I do think the Social Democrats, I think like all parties right now, have kind of started running out of ideas, and I don't entirely blame the parties for running out of ideas right now. Westbridge is dead. It's going to take an absolute Herculean effort by anyone to try and even put a little bit of life into it. And with that, it has just stunted so many other elements of the community. So trying to create policy that's relevant to people now is really difficult, because the game by which you make policies that are relevant to people is completely stunned right now, and everyone's playing Westbridge Public other than on Thursdays. Excuse me. So it's going to be really difficult to innovate, but that's the point, really. I think the Social Democrats really, we have to innovate. We have to come up with an alternative. And I'm not going to stand here right now and say, I've got the plan right now, it's right here, it's an oven-baked ready deal, and I can implement it tomorrow. I'm not going to turn around and say that. I'll be genuinely honest with you. It's going to take time to develop that plan, because one, I'm fresh off the press, I've just re-entered politics. Give me a second. And two, those ideas have to come from people on the ground, I think. I'm not a natural-born Westbridge player. I will admit I'm much more focused on the Discord side of things. I ran the BBC. I did broadcasting and journalism and archival for the National Archives. I'm a lot more in the sort of administrative part of things. So ideas need to be cultivated from people who play the game, and it's my duty as leader to bring up those ideas, scrutinize them myself, develop them to be workable. Because the party itself needs to scrutinise its own ideas, I think, before we put them to the people, and that's what the entire development process within the party needs to look like going forwards. I think it's too easy these days, and it's been the case in the past where I think parties just put down an idea, they don't really scrutinise it themselves that much, and they just kind of throw it out there. I think the National Party Manifesto had a lot of that, honestly. There's just a lot of rehashed ideas, and it's just like, is that actually going to do anything? Not really, probably not. So I don't want the Social Democrats to fall into that hoop. I think mistakes have definitely been made. I'm a new leader. I'm fresh. I am here now. I've just arrived. I'm going to do things differently to the way they were done before. The Social Democrats is not going to be the same ever again. That much I can promise.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. Sort of staying on the subject of policies and so on, obviously a sort of somewhat bigger change has been coming that seems to be on the majority of parties' manifestos. In fact, I think I think all of the parties might have had it, except for the Nationals on their manifesto, was the abolition or removal of the Department of Culture, Media and Sport. Obviously, a lot of people have sort of termed it irrelevant. Obviously, you having worked in the BBC right at the top, I would imagine you've had some sort of degree of interaction with them. And what's your stance on that policy? We'd like to see the Social Democrats continue to follow through with that.
Yeah, a good question, and I do have I'll give you the answer I've told pretty much everyone else who has asked me in the past month about this, and it's the following. I used to be a massive advocate of the DCMS. I think a lot of people know this. I used to love the idea of the DCMS. I called it the Innovation Department. The Nationals took that a bit too literally and actually put the I in DCMS I, which was flagrantly stupid. They shouldn't have done that. Thank God it got reversed. But anyway, I hope they don't do it again. Please don't. Bush, if you're listening, don't. But getting back to the answer, I think my arguments for the DCMS's existence about 2 months ago, let's say, where I would have said it should exist, I think there's a lot of potential with it. I feel like I've collapsed. I'm going to admit, I think my arguments on that front have collapsed. I can't say with certain, if we go letter by letter here, culture, nothing cultural has really happened. It's Christmas season, so I hope we do see some fun cultural things on the government side of things. I really hope we do. In terms of media, everything the DCMS does for media could just be done by the Treasury in a much more efficient manner. So I really don't see the argument for media needing its own department, so to speak. You also have Ofcom, which is like an independent agency anyway. So that's already independent and could just obviously feed back to the Chancellor instead of a Culture Secretary. And sport is pretty much private sector anyway, which again kind of falls under the Treasury there. There's a lot of crossover that I think could just be avoided. And I think it would be far more efficient to just cut the DCMS and put it under the Treasury and give a lot more responsibility to the Chancellor. Because right now the Chancellor, the position of Chancellor doesn't really have much to do besides throw Robux at things and business policy, which is a bit ineffectual right now because Westbridge is dead. So I think the Chancellor could just deal with those duties. It would just be far more efficient. And yeah, I know people in my party disagree with me on that, but that's absolutely my views on that. And if it ever came to a vote in Parliament, I'd vote to abolish personally.
So, if you move hypothetically, if Social Democrats came along, and you were to move everything under the Treasury, obviously that is. I mean, I know you've said there is now a reduced workload because of the decline in Westbridge, but that would still add responsibilities to the Treasurer. So, would we be likely to see some sort of sub team, I suppose you could say, of people to assist with that workload, or maybe just like, one or two people or something?
I mean, I don't exactly want to read out a plan for merger for Michael to essentially plagiarize, because I'm sure he's already probably got his own plan, and I'm 99.9% sure the permanent secretary to the Treasury, David Rothschild, already has like a plan for this, because obviously it's becoming incredibly likely now with the last two governments that have happened and the U-turns in policy and whatnot. So I don't think it would be really a burden on the Treasury. I think you could easily merge it in without having to create new sub-offices. I mean, Ofcom, I imagine the DCMS server would be rebranded to Ofcom. So Ofcom would be separate from the Treasury server, mostly because I don't think anyone exactly wants government ministers being able to read Ofcom tickets, because government ministers tend to own media companies, and that would be a little bit of a conflict of interest. So I imagine Ofcom will still be separate and treated as separate from the Treasury as like the ICO, the Information Commissioner's Office, and like the office, OFIS, is to like cabinet office operations, for example. So I think a transition would be quite smooth, really. The only issues I see is with Media House, because Media House is the way in which journalists from 20 different media companies are all put into one group, or join a group to then be able to join the media game on Westbridge. Of course, the aforementioned main game of the community is currently dead right now, so there's not too much of a concern there, but I feel like it's easily solvable by just putting in a role request channel in the Treasury server, which already exists, and just saying, if you're a member of a media company, request roles in the media group here, and boom, that's the job, put down to the company's house. It's all about efficiency, really, and I just don't really see too many hiccups with that. I really can't see anyone bollocking that up, really. I think you'd have to actually purposely bollock up the merge to really, for it to go wrong. It's a pretty simple process.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. It's quite interesting to hear that. Now, going back to the sort of social democrat policies, whilst I'm here, we've had some anonymous questions sort of submitted. So I'll read out the next two slightly later on. But I think I'll read this one out first because it's more relevant to the subjects at present. So the person here has asked, what are your plans and opinions on the courts currently? Obviously, I know it's still sort of early days, but what's the plans and opinions on that?
I'll give you my opinions. Plans are something that needs to be hashed out with the party, and once again, I'm new. I'm not going to confirm any plans because I have to discuss that with my party and my partymen. So I'm not going to come out here and waffle on policy, but I'll give you my opinion on the courts. Personally, I've never been too big on justice. Personally, my one interaction with the courts was my national security threat appeal, which is just wonderful to bring up in an interview. That appeal passed and whatnot, and well, hoo-ha, here we are. But in terms of the courts, I think I'd have to formulate my opinions on, in terms of policy, I'd have to formulate that based on, expert accounts on how it actually functions internally. I've never personally worked in the courts. I'm not going to come in here and say, oh, the courts are terrible, despite having not experienced it that much personally. I think it's something for people who are actually involved in that area to make comments on, with regard to there's not enough judges and thus not many cases are being done, or rather what's more likely is the game is dead and we're not getting enough cases, which I'm sure are issues that will need to be tackled. Perhaps an emphasis on civil lawsuits and whatnot could possibly cater for the lack of criminal cases that would be coming in. But it's something I think that would have to be left to experts and people who know a lot more about it than I personally do. I don't want to pretend I know everything about justice and I know how to fix it from top to bottom when I myself don't have a bar and I myself have had very minimal interaction with it. I think it's something best left to people who know what they're doing, and I very much hope to have a team that knows what they're doing, because I like to think I'm very good at picking my teams.
Lovely, thank you very much. So just moving on to the next thing now. So going back to sort of how things have changed again. Obviously, we've had the four-party system implemented the summer of last year, so the summer before last. That has since been removed, I believe, under Callum's government. However, as of now, there are no new parties. What's your sort of opinions on how the four-party system has affected things, and what are your views on sort of going forward with that? Obviously, I'm aware back when you were previously involved in frontline politics, that was not really a thing, and you had hundreds of parties here and there, and it sort of kept things a little bit more interesting. What's your sort of opinions on that?
I will say I do miss the diversity of parties that used to exist. I mean, I've been here for many years, and there are just so many cool parties that have exist, like the Imperials, Royalists, Theo Novak's edition of New Labour, Nathan's Reform Party was also quite entertaining. There's a lot of good parties, I think, throughout this community's history that I look back on quite fondly, and they obviously had a large impact on the political community's psyche and the way it's developed. Politics is a bit, I think, stagnant right now. Obviously, the most challenge the four-party system has had in the last few months was when the Socialist Party tried to register, and of course, those socialists have since merged back into the Social Democrats prior to my return. I think there's not a lot of demand for a new party right now. I don't think no one has come forward and said, I'm going to create a party and gotten enough support for it. I think the Electoral Commission guidelines on party registration are fine. I do think they have to be quite stringent, because otherwise you end up with parties that will die immediately or win 1 or 2 seats at most. I think it is quite nice that the system has developed to the degree that we do have very established parties with very established secretariats and internal mechanisms. And I do admire parties like the Pirate Party for having that, and I do admire that if in the Unionists prior to the last few months, it does feel like they've lost quite a few of their veterans. But I think there's just not enough. There's not a lot of demand for a fifth party right now, or at least the situation isn't allowing for it right now. I think people have conformed to one of the four parties so far. There's obviously been a lot of defections recently, but none of those defections have been in the aim of creating a new party. So I'm happy that the system allows for new parties, but obviously no one's capitalizing on that right now. So, I'm not one to encourage people to make a new party if it's at the Social Democrats' expense, obviously, but I think it's absolutely fine that people have that right now if they so wanted to exercise it.
Lovely, thank you very much. So moving on to the sort of next thing, I'll go to some of the questions I've got actually, because they're all sort of on a similar level. So I've got two people here, or well, there might be a third one in a minute. But I've got two anonymous questions here. So the first one is, well, three, but from two different people. The first one is going to be about the. I mean, obviously, this is sort of before your leadership. So, but I'm just going to read it out anyway. So they're asking here why the manifesto for the Social Democrats basically hasn't changed for the last 2 terms, even though some of the things on it have allegedly passed. I'm not sure how fact accurate that is, but apparently that's what I've been told. So
that's a really good question. It kind of highlights one of the points I mentioned earlier. I mean, again, full honesty here, there is a lack of innovation in politics right now. And I'm using that word a lot, but I think it's a very important word to use here. There's not really many new ideas being introduced that have been properly developed to the degree that a leader then puts them on their manifesto. I think a lot of leaders, they've gone into the habit, and this has been for a few years now, I will admit, Every single leader, including myself here, is guilty of it. You slap on ideas that have been regurgitated from previous manifestos, either your party's own or other parties, and so all the manifestos kind of assimilate together in your minds because they're all kind of saying the exact same thing, and there's not a lot of difference. And so I wouldn't blame anyone if they were of the mind that the parties are all the same right now. Like that is absolutely a completely fair conclusion to come to right now with the complete and utter state of politics right now. I'm hoping to change that. That's why I'm here. So what I would say to that person is I completely agree. Like, absolutely, I completely agree. I think there's been a lot of failures from all parties, including the Social Democrats. It's always important to admit mistakes here. Even though it was before my time, it's important to admit that, yeah, party manifestos are very sameish right now. And I'm hoping to turn that around. I'm hoping that new ideas can be brought forward by developing, people who are either parliamentary candidates or just campaigners or existing MPs even that I've appointed in, the last day or so. And I'm hoping that they're able to bring a new breadth and new ideas that the party can then scrutinise. The party can then say, right, that works. That might not work much. So we'll see if we can develop that a bit more. If it can't, then put it to one side. But we try to bring forward new ideas. We put it to the people and say, look, we've brought something new here. We believe this is going to work. We've scrutinised it. We've seen that, we've basically kind of like tested it, essentially. We've tested it in our heads. We've tested whether or not we're going to be able to implement this. And we're going to bring it forwards and see if it can help the community's problems. That's the sort of leadership and little mechanisms in policy formation that I want to bring forward. So I'd say to that anonymous questioner or viewer, rather, hold out hope. I really do hope to bring some hope. You're right there. I do believe either Adrian's microphone's not working right now, or he's gone very silent. Oh, there you are, Adrian.
Oh, there we go. Sorry, yeah, no, it was muted.
Oh, right.
Right, okay then. I have a little button that I pressed down when you were talking, and evidently I hadn't pressed it all the way up fully.
Oh,
So I do apologise to our viewers about that. But anyway, moving back onto the questions. So this is going back to the first person who submitted a question about the courts. The other two questions he's asked are sort of very similar, so I'm going to sort of band them into one here. But he's essentially asking, what's going to be different this time about your return to politics? Obviously, he said here that last time that you said you were building a movement under Labour, of course. Then we had the whole incident with the buyout situation. For the viewers who aren't aware what that was, basically back in 2022 there were some disagreements. I can't remember what disagreements. I think it was to do with some chief of defence staff or something, and it basically resulted in a lot of people leaving, which included Dean, who was at the time Prime Minister. So what the person here is basically asking, what's going to be different this time around?
Mm-hmm. I would like to address the buyout thing real quick and say that I absolutely made mistakes back then. I've been very honest about this when I returned to the community back in January and did my NST appeal the following month, I believe. I've been very honest in saying that I absolutely made mistakes. I burnt a lot of bridges that I shouldn't have burnt, and I broke the trust of many friends. I like to think that having returned and done the work that I've done at the BBC and trying to give back to the community that I had been part of for up to 9 years at that point, I like to think that I've given back as much as I can and kind of tried to earn the rights to be able to be your representative, to be your statesman. Because I do think that trust needs to be earned. I very much hope that has been earned with my work in the public, the national broadcaster and the National Archives. But to address the question at heart there of what's going to be different, I want to delegate more this time round. I think one mistake I absolutely made back in the day was that I think I took on a lot for myself. I think I took on a lot of duties, and I think I didn't give a lot of opportunity back then. I don't think to a lot of people who absolutely deserved it. I'm going to be absolutely honest and say that, yeah, I think there's a lot of people who I should have, brought in. I think trained up and developed and given a lot more responsibilities to, instead of bearing that myself. And I think putting on a lot of stress, which obviously takes up a lot of time. And ultimately, we're all doing this for a hobby, aren't we? And they're doing it for a hobby, and they need something to enjoy. So I want to delegate a lot more, and again, put a lot more trust in people who are very obviously passionate for what this community is about. We're all here because maybe we want to pretend to be in the army and be a soldier. Some of us want to play fireman or play as a police officer or an ambulance worker, and some of us want to be statesmen and parliamentarians. And whatever it is, I think you absolutely deserve to have those opportunities present to you. And politics can be very cliquish. I do kind of want to try and break that. Of course, I'm going to be surrounded by friends and people who I certainly invest a lot of trust in to advise on the day-to-day. But those opportunities absolutely have to be given to a wider range of people, and that's what I want to do different personally. And that's something that I told myself going back in, and I said it to Blair as well, and a couple of others, that I want to give a lot more trust and responsibility to people who very clearly want to do this, want to be involved in politics, because otherwise they're never going to learn, are they? They're never going to truly develop themselves into the best MP that they can be, or the best campaigner that they can be, or the best activist that they can be, or the best person that they can be. And yeah, that's kind of the ethos I want to roll with for however long I'm doing this for. I like to hope that I'm doing this for the year. I would very much like to, but obviously we have to see how that goes. We have to. I would love to have the confidence of the Social Democrats for that long, and I'm hoping to place a lot of trust in the Social Democrats to then trust me to lead them to victory. That's my ethos, really. That's what I want to do.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much, Dean. Our next, I think this is our final question so far that's been submitted before we get back to my list, although I think we're almost through all of mine. So it's one of your voters here. He's asking what the Social Democrats' position regarding the United Nations is. He's saying, given its significant inactivity, apparently, I can't confirm here, I'm not really involved with the United Nations, but said person has called it inactive, and apparently it offers little to nothing for the UK, while taking substantially more from the group. Again, this isn't fact checked for obvious, it's just what said person has said. What actions will you be taking to address this issue, he says?
Good question. It's a question I've had before. I believe the person asking, I've had discussions with them before, or at least I've had the issue brought to me. And of course, I'm an MP now. Constituents should and can always come to me with concerns and questions and thoughts and opinions and all that, and I welcome it. With regard to the UN, it is something I've heard, and I must admit, I must inform myself more on that situation. Of course, when it comes to British foreign policy, it's no secret that a lot of that is handled by people who are a lot more involved in those things than elected politicians. That is just a fact of the matter. The foreign secretaries and prime ministers are very much the face of British foreign policy. A lot of the internal mechanisms are all very informed based on the ambassador, the diplomatic service and ambassadors, and of course the permanent secretary. These are conversations that need to be had with the people who have interacted with the UN pretty much every single weekend, and almost every single day, for counting, of course, nation visits and whatnot. I absolutely hear the concern, though. I will say that my initial thoughts is that it's a drastic action, and if it's going to be done, for example, like leaving the UN, which the UK has an absolute history of, we've done it about 3 times now, I believe. If we were going to do that and explore different options, that would have to be scrutinised massively. within the FCDO. And of course, that would have to be done with the confidence of the British people, because a major chunk of, I think, this community's prestige and whatnot is foreign affairs and projecting that in, abroad globally and just within the Row Nation community. So it's something that needs to be scrutinised massively. But it's certainly an idea. Of course, I'm not going to say it's part of the Social Democrat platform, because that needs to be scrutinised and it needs to be explored, so to speak. I'm not going to rule it out, but at the same time, it's a very drastic suggestion to perhaps remove the UK out of the UN and explore different options. So credit where credit is due. The gentleman who I do believe is asking has done their research, and they are. I do believe that they are well informed on it. So at least I'm assuming here, because I've heard that question before from two individuals, and they're both quite well versed on it, I think. So credit where credit is due.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. And sort of leading on from that, that's part of my own question here. Well, sort of adding context on from that as well. As obviously with the UN, certainly from my experience, obviously my main part of being in this community has mostly been within the armed forces. I've been an instructor in household cavalry, grenadier guards, all the rest of that. And quite a lot of what we did, not so much with the UN, and obviously there's quite a big difference between the government and the forces here. They don't really interact as much, but I think it's safe to say that we've certainly this year, I'm not so sure about recently, because obviously I've left the Guards since August now, and I have no idea what they're up to these days, except for when they post stuff on Twitter. But I think it's safe to say that this year, certainly from what I saw, we did see a dramatic increase in cooperation with other nations, with military operations. Something we didn't, certainly back when I was in the household cavalry 2 years ago, when you were previously Prime Minister, we didn't really see as much sort of foreign operations going on. So sort of what's your sort of take on that when it comes to the usefulness of the UN? Obviously I'm aware the force is a completely different theatre for you, but and that sort of comes on to the general bigger question of what's your sort of take on the forces. I mean, I know government and forces are very different, but I think certainly coming towards the end of my time there was certainly some liaising between foreign relations and general staff and all the rest of it, planning these sort of large scale operations and all the rest of it, and getting involved. I mean, I know you've been involved with various operations when you were Prime Minister. So what's your sort of take on all of that?
I mean, I do like the British Armed Forces quite a lot. I remember during, I think it's during my first term that I met with Noah Collins, who was at the time, I believe, Chief of Defence Staff. And we took a photo at Larkhill, and it was, in my opinion, I think it was the first time in many years that a Prime Minister and a Chief of Defence Staff are standing side by side with governmental and armed forces cooperation. And I remember doing Guardian Centres as well, thanks to a local Gambino. He's an absolute legend, and I very thankfully invited me to those events where I got to play as a hostage and stuff like that and observe what the armed forces were doing. It's really fun. I kind of wish I got involved with it at one point, but my computer would never be able to run all that. And I must admit, I've not played Phantom Forces in a while, so I don't think my shooting would be very good now. So, but no, I have a lot of respect for the armed forces. Of course, Ryan is at the helm, and I've had certainly a rocky relationship with Ryan. All the biot stuff that's happened, but I do think he's done a good job. Genuinely, I think the armed forces is in a very good place, and they do have a lot of might. This community is kind of built on the military. The military was a major element, back in the day, and it's always going to be a major element. Excuse me. So obviously that force is then projected through the UN, through stuff like the Blue Beret parade. Try to say that 5 times after a couple of drinks. And of course with just cooperation with countries in the UN, like we have done with Turkey previously, and of course Malaysia, which is another great community. So I do think the UN's a good mechanism to project all that. I think ultimately a lot of the Roblox experience is getting in a game and having fun. the mechanisms through which you do that and project that on through like Twitter and social media and Discord and various channels like International Feed and so forth. I think those are always interchangeable. There's always going to be, I think, different ways to project it. But the UN is obviously a major one, which is why I think that the idea of potentially leaving and going to and trying to go to a newer and more active, so to speak, UN needs to be scrutinized, because if we did leave the UN, that's that. We're probably never going to re-enter it ever again, because we've done it 3 times already now, and they'd probably get pretty sick of us. So, it's like doing Brexit 3 times over the course of several years. It's just like, no, come on, can't make a decision really. But it's something that needs to be, again, scrutinized. Refer to my previous answer, essentially.
Lovely, thank you very much. And sort of leading on from the UN, obviously, I believe Michael and the Unionists are wanting to get to G5 status, I do believe. That was in their manifesto. So what's your opinions on that?
Well, I do remember back in the day, when I was in opposition, I was third party leader during Safe Chatter's first term. He had won quite a big result, and I believe he formed did he form a coalition? No, he was in a minority in the first term. And I do remember he tried to pursue it, and to his credit, he got close. The vote kind of turned at the last minute. I'm sure Lawrence Eden will have a lot more to say about that, as he was part of the FCDO at the time, and he was the one, I think, spearheading that for the government. Excuse me. But I think it's attainable. There's nothing saying it isn't. There's nothing saying that the UK cannot get, to the P5 position in the UN. It's entirely possible, but we've pardon my language, we are past the watershed anyway, I believe, but we have buggered it several times, and of course, going for P5, sure, we can achieve that. And if the government does achieve it, I'd be genuinely ecstatic, because that would be such a big win for British politics and British foreign policy. Again, harking back to the previous question, there's of course going to be people probably saying, well, what's the bloody point if the UN's not that active? But I see both sides, but ultimately I think there is a great deal of prestige to winning back P5, despite the absolute rockingness of a relationship we've had with the UN in the past. I think that would be a big win. So, the government absolutely has my endorsement on trying to get to P5. I'm just casting doubt on whether or not, it will go right, because it's gone wrong before. And there would have to be, I think, a serious kind of change in tactics, perhaps, or at least, something different would have to be done to actually attain it, or the means of attaining it. Because it's obviously, it's been a couple of years. Well, obviously, the UK rejoins the UN earlier this year, but we obviously haven't gotten it now, and I think a lot of people have been dreaming of it for so long that it's just like, I don't know, but I very much hope that we get it, Adrian. I very much hope we do.
Yeah, I think that would be certainly beneficial for all aspects of the community. Now, moving on to some more sort of going back to the Social Democrats, and this is more sort of aimed at what you outlined in your speech the other day. I'd like to go in depth in a few more subjects, especially the main one being, obviously you said you want to build a new generation of politicians, but you said there was a large amount of sorry, I'm trying to think of the word here, passion, that's it, but not that much support for them. In what way is there support? How do you think there could be sort of improved support for aspiring politicians?
I think a lot of it comes down to guidance and pointers, really. Again, there's people like me in the party. There's people, lovely people like Sid, who was my deputy leader for over a year back here during my first run as party leader back in the Labour Party. And he's grown so much. He's become a massive veteran figure of the Social Democrats now, because he has been insanely loyal to the party. the party itself, not necessarily Social Democrat governments. I know he's resigned from them, but he's been very loyal to the party brand and to the party structure and the party itself. So he's probably the greatest example of someone who I think early in their career, I don't think they had passion for politics and had a little bit of knowledge, but needs to hone that in. And I like to think that I helped with that. I think he was an amazing deputy leader, and he learned, I think, a lot. And obviously, he went on to become general secretary. He's been in several governments, and he's an absolute living legend, in my opinion. I want more people in the Social Democrats like Scripted Sid. I'll be absolutely clear with you. I want more people like Scripted Sid. I want more Sids. I want more people who come in, obviously, with a little bit of knowledge and a lot of passion. They come into the party knowing that they like British politics. They like the idea that things can be better, that they want to make a change. They want to get involved in the community, and they want to do something. But of course, it's going to be my job to improve their knowledge through literally talking with them, engaging them, giving them the opportunity to serve within positions within the party that then help towards our campaign efforts and activism and whatnot. I think a lot of it's about hands-on experience, and for a lot of them, sadly, we only have 13 seats. I can only appoint myself and obviously 12 others, and I like to think that the MPs that I've appointed, they're going to be a wonderful fit. I've tried mixing in people who I absolutely trust and will help me teach people who are new and very fresh off the press in politics, and people who could, of course, use a little bit more development and have already served as MPs for the party. I think that mix within the parliamentary party is great. I think it will be representative of what I want to do for the wider party, really. And hopefully, after 2 months, by the time we get to the next election, whether or not that's in 2 months or a bit earlier, really depends how Mike and Bush handle things. I really like to hope that the party will be in a very strong position, and that we will have not just a party, but a movement of people and a generation of future leaders in this community who will become prime ministers, who will become home secretaries, who will become, so much more, and continue to press this community forwards. That's my dream. I hope I live to see it through personally as party leader.
Lovely, thank you very much. And just delving slightly back more into that again, with your sort of picking of the MPs, I'm aware that obviously this is something that you said in your speech on, I believe it was Sunday, about there's going to be changes, and not everyone's going to like all those changes. And I'm assuming you're sort of referring to the decisions with MPs sort of initially there anyway. And obviously, since then, there's been a list of MPs come out. As you said, you've sort of hand-picked people as you've liked. However, there's some people that I think might have been MPs before or whatever. I'm aware there is quite a bit of upset there. Now, some of them aren't as bothered. They usually the sort of more experienced ones I think have sort of taken it quite well. But what's your sort of stance on all of that? There's been people calling you, I suppose, corrupt. What would your response to that be, and what would you tell to those MPs who maybe have lost their spots or were told, oh, if you get this number of people to vote for Social Democrats, you'll get a seat, and then they didn't? What would you tell to them?
I would say this: there's a big difference, I think, between being a good campaigner and being a good MP. That's why I would first begin by saying there. I'm not even going to bother to address the accusation of corruption, because I think anyone with more than 2 brain cells would realise that's a load of baloney. Yeah. But I have been very, special in my choosings of MPs. I've sought counsel from people, who have been in the party for a very long time, and I'm happy to say that people like Jimbo, the General Secretary, Scripted Sid, my deputy leader, who will continue to be my deputy leader, and Hierarchy, who I'm going to be making my chief whip, and someone who I'm investing a lot of trust in, despite not knowing for an extreme amount of time, like Sid, for example. I've sought their counsel because I'm very new to the party. I absolutely admit it. I'm a new figure, but I'm someone who has led parties before, and I have won 4 elections. I do know what I'm doing in terms of trying to build a party for victory. I sought their advice, and I said to them, give me pointers. Who in the party do you think has the absolute potential to work with what you already know of me, what I want to do. I told them that I want to develop MPs. I want to train them to be the best MPs they could possibly be, so in 2 months' time we are the best. So I asked them for like pointers, names, people who might fit this and that, and I've tried to appoint 12, including obviously myself making 13, of the best people for that vision. I wish I could appoint everyone. Adrian, I'm telling you that now. I wish I could appoint everyone. It is, of course, heartbreaking every time to try and pick who is the most deserving, so to speak. But it's difficult. It was always going to be difficult decisions, and like I said during my speech, it was never going to be an easy decision to make, especially with that little seats. But I've had 13 seats before. It's I've had 23 seats before. I've had 13. I've had 7 before. And I'd like to think I have a very good record of picking good people for seats, even when we're at our lowest. I picked a very good team of 7 people back in October of 2021, and within 2 elections, we were back on 23 seats. And I'd like to think that the first election we fought after that was a miss because Safe Chat was very good. So I know what I'm doing. I would say to them that I know what I'm doing, and there will be opportunities. I want to build more than just a parliamentary party. I want to build a movement. I want to build a party secretariat that a lot of these people who didn't get seats can, of course, participate in. I'm going to send them offers. There's always going to be opportunities outside of Parliament, and it's absolutely my responsibility and my duty to them to say to them, right, you didn't become an MP, but here's what you're going to get, because I trust you, I value you, and you have put in so much work into this party that although I couldn't get you a seat, I'm going to give you this, and you can keep working hard. And if we do win, if we do keep winning, if we do eventually win more seats and whatnot, I want you beside me in Parliament. I want you to be able to write bills. I want you to be able to represent the people in this community. I want you to be able to innovate. I want you to be able to, in many months and years to come, maybe you'll even be Prime Minister. Because, I was once in that position back in 2017. I didn't dream of ever being here, and here I am. So I would say to those people, do not lose hope. I said this during my speech, I believe, but do not lose hope, because there will always be opportunities, and I will always be at the service of the party and the people who make that party possible. I just need a little bit of their trust. That's what I would say to them.
Lovely. Thank you very much. I think that was very interesting to hear. Hopefully that's answered people's questions, because I did have some people coming along long before this interview began, asking to publicise news like that. Obviously, I thought it would be more appropriate to bring into this interview. However, this is sort of leading on to my own sort of. I think this is probably going to be the final question here. It's going to be, obviously, as you said yourself, there's a big difference between a good campaigner and a good politician. Now, the way, certainly, from my experience, because I think I did do a little bit of campaigning back with the Unionists, must have been a year ago now, under TBU, and very much the way it operated back then, and I think even the Conservatives, I think I was involved with that at some point when I had a friend that was an MP or something. The way it seemed to work back then was if you got, whoever got the most, obviously when it came to the seats, first it would be all of the cabinet that would get the seats, of course, and then after that it would just be whoever's got the most, votes. And not everyone has all the time in the world to go on Westbridge and talk to loads of people, and obviously these days it's very different, because as we've mentioned before, Westbridge has completely changed with Westbridge Public coming along, and that's obviously for various reasons not going to go away, except for on Thursdays. So what's your sort of take on that? Are we like to see any changes? I'm aware that was the Unionist way, however, from what I've sort of heard, I'm assuming that's the way it's been working in Social Democrats as well. So going forward, are we likely to see any changes to that way of selecting MPs for the Social Democrats?
I mentioned a bit of this in my last answer with regard to the MP selections and why I made the decisions I made. But I do want to address your question in terms of the, I guess, theory behind just picking in general and the general culture of that. I do not agree with the idea that, obviously, just because you campaign a lot you should be a member of parliament. I think there's a very big difference between a very good campaigner and a very good member of parliament. The skill sets are very different. Being a good campaigner, you need to be able to obviously connect with people. You need to be able to speak to them. You need to be able to go up to them in Westbridge, of course. DN campaigning is banned now. Another big difference between my days and back in my day and now, of course. But you need to be able to go up to people and convince them that your party is the best. That's a major communication skill. You have to be charismatic and whatnot. Some of those skills definitely come into being an MP. But to be an MP, in my opinion, you need to be able to write bills. You need to be able to look at a bill and point out issues and say, well, that doesn't look right. What the hell's that policy? What the hell are you doing, Mr. Government Man? You need to be able to scrutinise, be very investigative. You need to be able to also just be very open as well to the needs and wants of constituents, and that being the wider community. The skill sets are very different. I absolutely would love to train every single campaigner to have those skill sets. That would be an absolute dream. If I could train every single member of the party to be an amazing campaigner and an amazing MP and an amazing policy advisor and an amazing graphics person, if I could have just an army of jack of all trades, oh boy, I'd be on 50 seats already. But obviously, that's not always going to be the case. It's a near impossible task. I want to help people who are already in the party, I think, find their calling. If someone obviously has a lot of passion to be an MP and they're showing, the sort of the know-how already, like a little bit of the know-how and a little bit of the skills that could obviously be developed to become an even greater MP, or a greater MP candidate and then an MP, then yeah, I'd absolutely love to have them in Parliament, because that person, they could be Home Secretary, later in the year. They could be an absolutely amazing one. You never know. I want to cultivate that kind of talent. But conversely, there might be people who are much more better at the on-the-ground efforts at Westbridge. People who I absolutely will be entrusting to, the sort of guardianship of Blair, who again I've worked with over 3 years now, and someone who's an absolutely amazing campaign manager, and he'll be able to teach them the best ways to campaign, the best way to be able to, bring out the party message. I think it's all about, looking at someone and going, what is the best fit for you, and what is the best person that we can make out of you, and help them to chase those dreams. That's the kind of social democrats that I want to build. Which is why I get really angry when certain parties, the Nationals, kind of come out calling me a tyrant. I'm not a tyrant. I am trying to be as very, very benevolent as I can, in trying to enable the very best out of the MPs that and party members and campaigners that we have. It's going to be a very long process. But I do think we can do it in under 2 months before the next election. And I do believe that by the time of the next election, we are going to be a governing party. We are going to be the best possible governing party that we can be. And we will make this community a better place with new people, new ideas. And not just new people and new ideas, but people who know what they're doing and ideas that we know we can implement. That's a very important part of it. So I hope that answers your question, Adrian.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer to that. And that is my final question, Dean. So before I sort of, bring it all to an end, since we're still, on air and broadcasting, or do you have any sort of final things you'd like to get out to the public on here, or anything else, just generally, really? Anything else to say?
I do have a few parting comments, yeah. I would like to say this both to, of course, people who are already in the Social Democrats and people outside of the Social Democrats. I would like to think that I'm an example of someone who has absolutely made mistakes, and a lot of people certainly hate me for it. But I've made mistakes, and I like to think that I have tried to redeem myself and be able to, earn enough trust to be able to say to you now that I'm ready to bring you new ideas. I'm ready to, guide as many new partymen as possible, the Social Democrats, to being the best that they can be. Because ultimately, if I'm going to run a government, hypothetically in the future, which I very much hope that I do, at the next general election, whenever that may be, that government won't be good unless the party is good. The party and its people and its members and its staff and its everything needs to be strong. And I can only do that with the trust of the people in that party and the trust of the British public, really. So that is obviously what I'm asking for. I said during my speech that all I need of you is your trust and your loyalty. Because I need those in order to be able to say to you that I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to work with you, I'm going to deliver on what I'm working on with you. It's going to take time, it's going to take effort. The results will not be immediate because they never are immediate. Instant gratification is the end of all men, in my opinion. It never ends well trying to constantly satisfy yourself instantly, and it's just not possible in this circumstance. It will take time and it will take effort, but I am absolutely certain that the team that I'm assembling at the top will be absolutely capable of guiding the next generation of parliamentarians, statesmen, and activists and community leaders to be the best that they can possibly be so that this community can thrive. I've seen this community grow for many years now, and it can grow still, but it needs good people at the top, and I hope to build those good people. So, with your trust, support, loyalty, and more, I hope to deliver on that. So, to anyone listening, Social Democrats, Nationals, Pirates, and Unionists, I hope to make politics very exciting in the coming months, whether you love me or not. So, I hope to see you soon in Parliament and in public. But yes, that's all, Adrian.
Oh, lovely. Thank you very much, Dean. It's been an honour to have you on here, and I think it's very interesting insights, and building on from your speech on Sunday. I think that's certainly answered a lot of my questions, and hopefully everyone else's. Of course, for any of you, if you like what you've seen, do let me know, and hopefully we can get some more sort of general things. If anyone you'd like to see me interview, of course, do let us know. But yeah, anyway, it's been great to have you on here, Dean. I hope you've enjoyed your time on here.
Absolutely.
And yeah, I think that's pretty much all from me. In the most politically impartial way possible. Good luck with everything, of course.
Thank you very much.
Politically impartial here, but good luck with everything. We're all still one community at the end of the day, and so regardless of what people's takes on things are, have fun basically. Yeah, that's everything. I hope everyone watching has enjoyed, and thank you all to everyone who's been watching, and to those who have submitted questions, which I found quite interesting myself as well, to hear the answers about. So yes, I hope you've all enjoyed, and we look forward to seeing you whenever the next broadcast may be. Hopefully there'll be more broadcasts going forwards over the Christmas holidays. Well, that's all from me. I've been AdrianJWilliams from Williams Media, live from London.